as much as we can.
Our audience are really interactive.
Our listeners, our viewers, they're growing.
And that's because they tell their friends and family about what we're doing here at GB News.
It feels like the depth of that connection has strengthened as well.
Thank you so much for speaking to us on GB News.
Come and say hello to everybody that's here from GB News.
It's been an exceptional event.
We've come a long way here now.
What's so unique about GB News viewers is that they really, really love our country.
And they talk about us so proudly. We're on a journey together.
We are here for all of Britain. We believe in this country, we believe in its people, and we believe in all of the communities who live here.
That's what makes us the fearless champion of Britain.
Good morning to you. It's 9:30 on Tuesday, the 30th of June, live across the United Kingdom. Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, the defence plan is finally set to be unveiled this morning. Sir Keir Starmer will set out his long-delayed strategy to keep Britain safe and secure, with a huge focus on drones.
The duty above everything else is to keep our country safe and to keep our people safe.
No pay, no stay. That's what the government will have you believe. Migrants will have to pay their way towards their accommodation or miss out on settled status, if they can afford it, that is.
The scheme will work like student loans to bring down the spiralling cost of asylum claims, but can they get the money back? And will it work? And will it survive contact with Andy Burnham's government?
This helps to move us forward from a cycle of ongoing strikes, which have been going on for far too long and have cost the country billions of pounds.
Well, resident doctors call off their strikes after securing a pay rise worth over £100,000 for the top earners. Health Secretary James Murray told GB News this is a win for everyone.
Well, look, I think this is good news, not just for resident doctors, but also for all staff working in the NHS.
How much longer will he be Health Secretary? Maternity mess. The government is to appoint a National Maternity Commissioner after a damning report exposes repeated failings on the NHS.
If you so much as sniggers, I'm going straight back indoors.
Well, to the comedy actress Dame Penelope Keith, who's died at the age of 86.
Well, it's a huge day politically, isn't it, Miriam? Because we've got the Defence Investment Plan finally coming up, but we've also got this statement coming out from the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who says she is going to recoup potentially millions of pounds of money from asylum seekers to repay their cost of accommodation and all the rest. If they can afford it, it's going to be means-tested. If they say they can't pay, they don't have to pay. How are they going to do that when quarter to half of them never get a job?
That's right. And in effect, the taxpayer will be lending them the money to pay back the hotel fees, because that's exactly what happens with student loans. I mean, if it's modelled on the student loan system, I'm not sure that's such a great idea, because it hasn't worked out all that well.
No, the student loan scheme, I think, currently is £140 billion in debt.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge marker on our accounts. Shabana Mahmood seems to have made a lot of announcements on asylum this week. There is this one about asylum seekers paying back their hotel fees. Yeah. Of course, we've had the idea of citizen juries to decide asylum claims as well. Now, they sound good, and perhaps they're there to appease people on the left, but frankly, nothing is going to work until the small boats are stopped by detaining people as soon as they arrive and then deporting them. There was only ever been one plan for that. That was the Rwanda bill. It fell with the last government, and nothing since has come close to the kind of deterrent effect that might have had.
And in his keynote speech yesterday, the Prime Minister-to-be, Andy Burnham, did not mention migration once.
And lots of people on the right saying they hope that Andy Burnham keeps Shabana Mahmood in position as Home Secretary. She does certainly seem to be the most hardline of all the Cabinet. But with these announcements this week, I start to wonder whether or not she is losing her grip, or whether or not she's encountering so much opposition from the left that she just can't carry on.
I think it's the latter. As ever, tell us what you think. Send your views, post your comments by visiting
gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's your 60-second news update with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you from the newsroom. The top stories at 9:30. Sir Keir Starmer will unveil his long-delayed defence investment plan today after weeks of rows over whether Britain's armed forces are getting enough money. The strategy includes £5 billion for drones and autonomous weapons, but critics say it still falls short of what's needed to transform the military. The government is set to appoint the first ever National Maternity Commissioner after a major review found women and babies have been repeatedly failed by NHS care. The Amos review says there's a pattern of patient concerns being ignored, with discrimination and racism behind culture of inequality. Asylum seekers who start earning money in the UK could be forced to pay back up to £10,000 towards the cost of their support. The Home Secretary says that those who can contribute should do so, but campaigners are warning the policy could discourage refugees from working. In Monaco, police have launched a manhunt after a makeshift bomb exploded outside a residential building, seriously injuring multiple people, including a Ukrainian billionaire. Two of the victims have life-threatening injuries. Detectives believe the suspect may have fled across the border into France. And the long-running resident doctors' strike could finally be over after medics voted to accept a new pay deal. The agreement includes a 6.6% pay rise. Health officials say the average earnings will rise to around £52,000 this year once extra hours are included. Those are the latest headlines. A full roundup at 10.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome. You're watching and listening to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, we're finally going to get the long-awaited defence investment plan, which, remember, Miriam, cost the Defence Secretary his job. John Healey resigned. The Armed Forces Minister, Al Cairns, resigned. And we had a broadside against Keir Starmer's government from Lord Robertson, former Defence Secretary, earlier, who did the Defence Review, saying basically that we're underprepared, underinsured and under attack. And this defence plan that's being announced today by the Prime Minister, he's not even shown it, apparently, to Andy Burnham.
Gosh, extraordinary. And lots of people criticising Keir Starmer for announcing this, knowing that he is about to leave and setting in stone...
3 weeks to go.
Exactly, something in stone that something will be very difficult to reverse and undo instead of waiting just a couple of weeks for the new administration to take a look at it. And let's just...
And he's going to tell us there's going to be £5 billion extra for drones. Only £1 billion of that is new money.
Well, of course, John Healey, when he resigned, accused the Treasury of being unwilling to invest in defence. Obviously, they found £5 billion down the back of a sofa from somewhere. But I think there's much, much bigger questions to answer here, Andrew. I mean, the Strategic Defence Review was almost like a shopping list of what the armed forces wanted, but without the backup of the Defence Investment Plan, where the money is going to come from and when it's going to be invested, it was just wishful thinking, and we're perhaps about to find out that actually not everything that the army wants can be afforded.
And we're also going to see that we are falling way behind what our European counterparts are spending on defence, especially Germany and Sweden and other countries.
Poland, they've been an enormous
way behind us. Well, somebody who knows a lot about defence is the Conservative for Godalming and Ash, Sir Jeremy Hunt, a former Defence Secretary, former Health Secretary. Sir Jeremy, good morning.
Morning, Andrew. Morning, Miriam.
Good morning.
It is extraordinary to my mind that the Prime Minister is unveiling this plan this morning when in 3 weeks' time we'll have a new Prime Minister altogether who hasn't even been shown a copy, apparently, of this 80-page document.
Well, I agree. These are extraordinary times. And I, on one level, I understand why he wants to unveil something before the NATO summit in Turkey, which, is next week, and basically is always a moment of high peril because you never know what Donald Trump's going to do next. And so he wants to get something out there that shows the UK is spending more. But it is a damn squib, isn't it, really? Because, we know the Ministry of Defence wanted as a minimum 28 billion over 4 years. This is 15 billion. It's going to involve some big cuts to plans to expand the Navy. It's really not going to please anyone. So I do question the logic of it. And the fundamental reason, and I can speak as an ex-Chancellor as well as an ex-Foreign Secretary on this matter, is because the government won't bite the bullet on welfare reform. If they got the welfare bill down to 2019 levels, that would save £56 billion a year within 5 years. more than enough to get defence up to 3% of GDP, but they just won't bite the bullet. And that's why we're stuck in this limbo with this defence plan, which has got good bits to it. I think we all know we've got to spend more money on drones, but it isn't doing the job.
I mean, that is an extraordinary figure, isn't it? £56 billion a year. I mean, lots of defence chiefs would think all their Christmases had come at once if they were given that to boost their budget. But we know that Labour backbenchers are very unlikely to wear the kind of cuts that would be required to release that money. But the other problem that the government has is that over the previous Conservative government, the 14 years of Conservatives in power, there were cuts to defence. Our capabilities did deteriorate. And so in many ways, they have quite a mountain to climb. What was the thinking inside the Conservative government when you were there, when you were in the cabinet, as to why the funding was cut and why perhaps that has made our country less safe?
Well, we went through a period where the deficit was 10% of GDP. We had to make very painful cuts. We were borrowing, when George Osborne became Chancellor in 2010, nearly £1 in every 4 that the state spends. It was incredibly dangerous, and markets wouldn't have tolerated it. But then after the invasion of Ukraine, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, our thinking changed. And that was why Rishi Sunak and I, when you were in Parliament, Miriam, we decided that we needed to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. We started to put in place some welfare reforms. We wanted to go much further, actually, but then, the election came along. So we clearly were making the choice that is defence over welfare. By the way, something else that would have made a big difference is something that you were talking about earlier on the show, which is, if we kept the Rwanda scheme in place, the asylum bill is tens of billions of pounds. And that we know was working because we were getting migrants arriving in Ireland saying they didn't want to go to the UK anymore because they thought they might get sent to Rwanda. And that was actually happening before the first flights took off. So I really do think Shabana Mahmood, who I think is one of the most capable Labour ministers, in her heart of hearts, must rue the day that Rwanda scheme was cancelled.
Can we ask you as well, Sir Jeremy, because you were a very long-serving Secretary of State for Health. Finally, it seems the junior doctors, or resident doctors as they're called now, have called off their strike action. Some of them will be given pay rises taking them up to £100,000. Is the Health Secretary right that this is a good deal for everybody, or is this just a good deal for the militant British Medical Association?
Well, I'm worried that we are basically rewarding some totally unjustified strikes. I recognise that junior doctors, or resident doctors as they're now called, work very hard. I've got form on this issue, Andrew, as you will remember well, because when I was Health Secretary, they went on strike for nearly a year because I wanted to get more doctors working weekend shifts. But the truth is that to become a doctor, the state pays more than £250,000 for your training. And then in 10 years after you qualify, if you become a consultant or a GP, you will be in the top 2% of taxpayers on a six-figure salary, far more than most people can ever dream of earning. So I'm afraid I don't buy this argument that doctors in the UK are underpaid. I think our pay rates are very competitive to other European countries. But, the reason that we had these strikes was because the first decision that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer made when they came to office in July 24 was to cave in to all the public sector pay disputes in one go with a huge £9.5 billion bung to the unions. And of course, if you do that, people come back for more. And I'm afraid what worries me about this deal is that, yes, we'll have peace for a year, but then this time next year, they'll be back for more.
Pay, of course, is not the only reason for the strikes. Lots of junior doctors complaining about the small number of training places available, which meant they've gone through this arduous training that, yes, has cost the taxpayer £250,000, but then there just aren't enough training places to allow them to progress to the next level of seniority. Now, as part of this deal, it sounds like the government is opening up 4,500 more places. Is that enough? And how did we get to this situation where we were training so many more medical students than there were jobs available?
Well, the reason that we're training more students is because I increased the number of training places by a quarter in 2016, and then as Chancellor I doubled it because we still don't have enough doctors compared to other European countries. We need more. But there is a trade-off because the NHS, as you know, Miriam, has a budget. And if you spend more on pay, in the end, that means you've got less money for more doctors. And that's why I think you've got to be really careful when you make these decisions. But I think your broader point is the point that we should really be thinking about. The NHS is not a happy place at the moment. It is a very tough place to work. And the reason is, I think we've forgotten some of the basics. We have now turned too much of the NHS into a kind of call centre stroke conveyor belt where patients come in and they come out, and there's no real sense of which doctors are responsible for which patients. If you contact a GP surgery, you no longer have GPs responsible for their own lists of patients. You get to see the first GP that's available, which depersonalizes the process of going to a GP. It's also much less safe for patients because GPs who don't know their patients tend to make more mistakes. We've got another maternity scandal story today with the report by Valerie Amos. And I think the real issue there is that when a mum is pregnant, she should be assigned a doctor and a midwife or a team of midwives. These are the people that are going to be responsible for you and your baby from start to finish. And we don't do that. And so when you go into the maternity unit, you'll be seeing those midwives for the first time. And that means mistakes get made. So I think all of the reason, or a lot of the reason why the NHS is an unhappy place is because we've broken down the relationship between doctor and patient.
Can we ask you just finally, Sir Jeremy, you were a good friend of Dame Penelope Keith, I would say one of our great national treasures. Can you tell us how you were such good friends with her and why she was so special?
Well, I was really lucky because she was one of my constituents. And so she actually lived in the next door village to me in Surrey. And I got to know her, and I'll never forget actually going and having a cup of tea with her in her drawing room. And I was in complete awe of this absolute icon who had touched all of our lives. And sitting in her living room, she had the same booming voice, the same withering look. But she absolutely was not a snob. She was a lovely person who put her life into good causes locally and nationally. And I think she brought happiness to millions, but because she took a British vice, if you like, which is our snobbishness and our love of airs and graces, that if we're honest, we sometimes have, and she turned it into a virtue because she allowed us to laugh at ourselves. And we are really good in this country and not taking ourselves too seriously. And that's what Dame Penelope did for us.
And were you more of a Good Life fan or were you more up to the Manor Born, Sir Jeremy?
Actually, I love them all, but probably I like To the Manor Born. But, they were all absolute masterpieces.
Absolutely.
Sir Jeremy Hunt, former Chancellor, former Health Secretary and fan of Dame Penelope Keith. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Sir Jeremy.
Now, up next, we're talking again about the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who says migrants must pay their way towards their accommodation and miss out on settled status. But what happens if they say they can't afford the bill? You know what happens? They don't pay it.
But first, if you're in search of some holiday sun, here's the forecast for our top European destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Very hot weather and thunderstorms affecting parts of the Mediterranean and Eastern Europe through the next few days. Sunny and warm elsewhere across parts of Europe. The Canary Islands seeing highs of 30 degrees on Wednesday. Spain and Portugal temperatures in the high 20s, low 30s, much more reasonable than they have been lately. But it's Italy and towards Greece where very high temperatures are expected towards 40 degrees and a risk of heavy thunderstorms that continues until Friday. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
You've been to see Glengarry Glen Ross.
I have. So the movie was 92 and the play was 84, 85, something like David Mamet. It's all about men, or it's about men that are posturing being men. It's this idea of sort of toxic strutting, peacocking. However, the outrage, this most male of plays, has been cast with all women. Horrific. Taking away men's jobs right in front of us, Michael. It's on at the Old Vic, and we've got a cast of the ladies having a little word about it.
I think it might explode the play and open it up in really amazing ways, but we just don't know, and that is thrilling.
On first glance, you look at Glengarry and you think male, masculine world, male toxicity, but then if you strip that away and look at it from another lens, you say, no, this is about humans.
GB News, the People's Channel. Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Joining me now is Chef Julia Walsh, who's the head of patisserie at Le Cordon Bleu. Thank you. How lovely to see you. You look marvellous in your chef's hat and your chef's jacket. Tell me about Le Cordon Bleu.
Le Cordon Bleu has been in operation for over 130 years. We had our 130-year anniversary last year. I'm from the campus in London, in Holborn, and we have a very wide-ranging curriculum with our students. I teach patisserie, so for me, I teach students to learn about things such as bakery, cakes, entremets, such as this one here, and showpieces. We do chocolate and sugar sculptures as well.
GB News, the People's Channel. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
3 lines on my shirt, never stop me dreaming.
Could this be England's biggest superfan? Benny Elcock has covered his York home in St George's flags in support of England ahead of the World Cup. 3 Lions memorabilia are draped across his windows, garden gates and flower pots. Even the family's Yorkshire Terrier Reggie has his own outfit.
Been doing it for years. And always stick my Everton one up, because I'm a massive Everton fan. People just think I'm mad. Say, well, you've gone a bit mad, you've gone a bit overboard. I said, I don't care. I love it.
Football mad Benny can't wait for England's first match.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It is 9 minutes to 10. You're watching and listening to Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Christopher Hope is here, our political editor. Christopher, that was the former Chancellor Joko, I did actually say was the former Defence Secretary.
He's had so many cabinet jobs.
Many jobs. Secretary, Foreign Secretary, but not Defence Secretary. But you and I were talking, when he ran for the Tory leadership in 2019, how many hustings was he involved with the other candidates?
Well, there's some debate on social media about our new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, an MP only since last Monday. He walks into Downing Street 2 weeks on Monday now. We looked at the kind of scrutiny of this individual. We can't ask any questions of him. That's their choice. We tried yesterday and weren't allowed to ask questions yesterday, and he slipped out by a side exit. But if you look at what the Tories did, now the Tories have lots of critics, but they at least gave their members a chance to scrutinise what the next PM may do, and we as journalists could report on that. So back in 2019, when Jeremy Hunt, your guest there, stood against Boris Johnson, 16 hustings across the country for over 150,000 members or so. Back in 2022, Liz Truss versus Rishi Sunak, 12 hustings around the country. And what that meant, it was a selectorate, but at least we could hear what the plans were and tell, back then I worked at The Telegraph, we tell readers what's coming your way. We can't really say that. We've got no really way of checking out all this information in today's papers. Burnham, 10 years to rewire the UK. Well, that's what he says, right? But where's the money going to come from for the council houses? He wants to bring into public ownership vast areas of privately owned utilities and so forth. How are you going to pay for it? I mean, this is a debate we all need to have, I think, and we can't really with him.
It's a coronation.
Yeah.
Is that a very democratic way for this country to carry on?
No, it's not very democratic. Literally, it's not democratic. I mean, I just wonder how long he can last this without resisting the calls for the election.
And of course, the irony was, he said he couldn't take any questions from the press yesterday. He was up in Manchester where he made his speech because he had to get a train back to London. The whole point about his speech was he's going to take a lot of power out of London up to the north of England.
Yes.
And yet there he was saying he can't hang around because he's got to get to London.
Well, I was there too, and I caught a train back to London. He had a car to get into the station. I think he just didn't want to take questions. People say he hasn't got his ideas sorted out yet. They want to land their key messages about what the plans are for Manchesterism and so forth. But we should be able to ask, how are you going to pay for it? Let's talk about it. Will it be more taxes? Will he cut benefits? Will it be borrowing? Who knows?
The problem that Burnham has and the Tories have had in previous leadership campaigns is that the electorate that chooses the leader is not, of course, the same as the wider electorate, the people who go out to vote when it comes to general elections. And I know during the Conservative leadership campaign, MPs weren't just thinking about who do we think is the best person to be leader. You've got to think, who are our members going to vote for? And certainly in the Conservative Party, the membership is very, very far away from the average man on the street. Exactly the same in the Labour Party. So the problem that you have with a contest is someone that probably to the extreme left is therefore more likely to win. So, you know, it swings and roundabouts, doesn't it, here, Chris?
So what you mean is he could have been pulled further leftwards than already.
I mean, look at the more spending commitments in order to compete with whoever stood against him. I'm not sure involving the members, party members, is such a great idea, I have to say.
It isn't how we do. I mean, I was talking with some Americans about this, that they've got their issues with democracy and Donald Trump and so forth, but at least they do have elections, and the person in charge normally stays the full term. But what it means is we are questioning anything the government does. So today the government's announcing a big crackdown on the cost of asylum. Asylum seekers are forced to pay £10,000 towards the cost of their hotel accommodation and breakfast and benefits bill, etc. You can see why the sums are stratospheric. It's £50,000 a year to house an asylum seeker in a hotel, £12,000 in a house of multiple occupation, 107,000 asylum seekers, £4 billion cost of hotels, typically £144 a night to house people here, some of whom, not all, but some shouldn't be here or be sent home. This is why it's causing such an issue politically. Shabana Mahmood is out on the front foot saying that if you don't pay this charge, if you earn over a certain amount, maybe £20,000 after 5 years or whatever, you'll be barred from remaining in the UK.
Good luck with that.
Well, they say that. They're going to force it through HMRC, DWP and the Home Office. Let's see how it plays out. It's another big stick, but whether it works, and in fact whether Andy Burnham agrees with it, we don't know. I've gone to Andy Burnham's people this morning on behalf of you both. Does Andy Burnham agree with the new asylum-seeking crackdown? I don't know.
Extraordinary.
So
and of course,
many
if they don't get a job,
Chris.
they can't pay it back. And apparently, if they say they can't afford to pay it back, what are they going to do? Offer £1 a week?
Well, and you're not legally allowed to force anyone to destitution, so there isn't any real recourse to get this money back. Well, lots coming up on Britain's Newsroom. Not long till Keir Starmer announces his long-awaited defence investment plan. Will it go far enough?
Absolutely not. This is Britain's Newsroom, Britain's favourite morning show on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for the thousands of you who are becoming friends of GB News every week.
You're not only watching and listening to our programmes, you're becoming part of them too.
Good morning. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Significant traffic delays are impacting travellers on the M4 eastbound at junction 33 due to lane restrictions. In Devon, a collision on the A38 westbound has resulted in one-lane closure, leading to slow-moving traffic. Commuters in Essex are encountering severe disruptions since the A11 southbound is closed after a major crash. Those travelling through Portsmouth will experience delays on the A27 westbound, where 2 lanes are shut. Additionally, Avanti West Coast train services between Lichfield, Trent Valley and Stafford are experiencing issues that could affect passenger schedules. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
It's the Great British Giveaway Golden Summer Celebration. Your chance to win 2 fantastic prizes. There's an incredible £60,000 in tax-free cash. Plus, you'll also get your hands on a fine gold bar worth over £5,000. For a chance to win £60,000 in tax-free cash and a real gold bar, text GOLD to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB22 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 21st of August. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pulled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
At the stroke of midnight, the news doesn't stop, and neither do we.
Day in, day out. Forget stuffy late night TV shows. We're giving you a front row ticket to the centre of the political universe.
Because breaking news doesn't wait for the morning.
And neither do we. Join us for one of the most controversial and volatile times of politics in human history.
A very big story.
Big story over here.
You won't get this anywhere else. The Late Show live at midnight, every night.
Only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Tuesday the 30th of June. We are live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
So finally that defence plan is being unveiled. Sir Keir Starmer sets out his long-delayed strategy to keep Britain safe and secure with a huge focus on drones. But what will Andy Burnham make of it?
The duty above everything else is to keep our country safe and to keep our people safe.
There you have it there from Andy, from Sir Keir Starmer, not Andy Burnham. But in the past few moments, I can reveal Andy Burnham, the future Prime Minister, does approve of this settlement. It looks like the MOD will be getting the money they've been asking for, but not enough.
And no pay, no stay. Migrants must pay their way towards their accommodation or miss out on settled status.
This helps to move us forward from a cycle of ongoing strikes which have been going on for far too long and have cost the country billions of pounds.
Resident doctors, used to be known as junior doctors, have called off strikes after securing a pay rise which will give some of them more than £100,000 a year. The Health Secretary, James Murray, he is Health Secretary for now, told GB News this was a win for everybody.
Well, I think this is good news, not just for resident doctors, but also for all staff working in the NHS.
And a maternity mess. The government will appoint a National Maternity Commissioner after a damning report exposes repeated NHS failings.
If you so much as sniggers, I'm going straight back indoors.
And we've done a wonderful interview with one of Dame Penelope Keith's great friends, who was, of course, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. Farewell, Dame Penelope, who's died at the age of 86.
Sir Keir Starmer has been accused of dithering throughout his premiership, and the delayed defence investment plan is an example of that. And yet he's chosen to announce it, to set it in stone, just days before he leaves office.
Yeah, look, we'll have a new Prime Minister on officially. It'll be in number 10 on July the 20th. And Andy Burnham says he agrees with the plan. It was discussed en passant between the two of them in an hour conversation last Monday. He hasn't even seen the plan.
Neither have we.
Neither have we. The Prime Minister will be unveiling it at 10:30, not in Parliament. Then there'll be a detailed comment statement. And, of course, later today we'll say we're going to have the Home Secretary giving her idea of what I think sounds like a complete hodgepodge plan to get money off asylum seekers, up to £10,000 a year she's going to take from them. Where are they going to get that from?
Well, I was reading this morning that 10 years after being granted asylum, only around 20% of asylum seekers are in reasonably well-paying work. So it seems like a fool's errand. What I'm more worried about is the fact that her plans to restrict indefinite leave to remain have not yet come into force, and plenty of people who came over to this country in the so-called Boris wave are now reaching their 5-year period and able to settle permanently. That seems to me the most important and urgent problem to sort out.
So we'll bring you up to date on those two huge stories coming up. Now, as ever, we want to know what you think. Send your views, post your comments by visiting
gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. Just after 10 o'clock, the top story this hour, Sir Keir Starmer will finally publish his long-delayed defence investment plan today, after weeks of rows over whether Britain's armed forces are getting enough money. The strategy will focus on drones, autonomous weapons, with £5 billion also set aside for rapidly changing military technology. The plan has been delayed, though, by funding rows and helped trigger the resignation of former Defence Secretary John Healey. Critics say the settlement is too small, while ministers insist it will give troops the latest equipment and back British defence jobs. Well, the Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge joined us earlier, and he says the defence investment plan is too little, too late, and won't help to keep Britain safe.
The amount of money is barely only a smidge more than John Healey resigned over, because he said it wouldn't make the country safe. And at the same time, I say it's too late. It's not just how long we've waited for it. The capabilities you're hearing about, these drones and so on, sounds impressive. They're not going to come into service till the 2030s, and yet the threat we face is today. So I think it's very poor, and it reflects the fact that the Prime Minister has not prioritised defence. He's prioritised a bigger welfare state. That's where the money's gone.
A new National Maternity Commissioner will be appointed by the government after a major review found women, babies and families have been repeatedly failed by NHS care. Baroness Valerie Amos says women, babies and families deserve maternity care that is safe, compassionate and equal wherever they live. Her review found concerns were often dismissed. Internal investigations left families feeling trusts were marking their own homework, and that racism and discrimination remain critical safety issues. Ministers say the new commissioner will drive lasting change, but bereaved families still want a full statutory public inquiry. Meanwhile, the long-running resident doctor strike could finally be over after medics voted to accept a new pay deal. Settling the resident doctors' dispute will cost £200 million this year, according to the Health Secretary. James Murray says the deal is cheaper, though, than just another week of strikes, with walkouts costing the NHS around £50 million a day. The agreement means resident doctors' pay will be 35% higher on average than 4 years ago, with an uplift of 6.6%. Just over half of voting resident doctors accepted the offer, and the union says that the strikes will now come to an end. Well, ministers say the deal has broken the cycle of strikes after 21 days of walkouts by resident doctors in England just since last July alone.
The strikes have caused an impact on NHS services. Even though we've kept things going, kept most appointments in place, it's had a really big impact, not just on patients, but also on NHS staff who've had to step up to cover the strikes when resident doctors have been on strike. Now, the fact that we are now at an end of that process and the BMA said, look, the strikes now are over, means that we can move forward, and we can move forward and focus on working together with resident doctors to improve the quality of care for patients right across the NHS and focus on making the NHS stronger for the future.
In other news this morning, asylum seekers who start earning money in the UK could be forced to pay back up to £10,000 towards the cost of their accommodation and support. The Home Secretary says that the asylum system costs too much, with the government spending £4 billion on accommodation and support last year alone. The money would have to be repaid before someone could qualify for settled status, with monthly payments expected above a set income threshold. Critics, though, say the plan could discourage refugees from working and make it harder for families to rebuild their lives. And police have launched a manhunt after a makeshift bomb exploded outside a residential building in Monaco, seriously injuring 3 people, including a Ukrainian billionaire. 2 of the victims have life-threatening injuries and 1 person in hospital is a child. CCTV appears to show a man leaving with a backpack at the entrance shortly before the blast and then travelling on foot towards the French border. Monaco's leader has described the explosion as an odious act, while investigators say at this stage the motive is unclear. Those are this morning's headlines. More news shortly. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Miriam.
Hello, good morning and welcome. You're watching and listening to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Now, I just want to say I had the most lovely present this morning from a GB News viewer. I won't give her name away because it was very nice. She read my book, Finding my Birthmother, and sent me a big packet of licorice all sorts because they were the first sweets Mum and Dad, who adopted me, ever bought me.
I hope you're going to share them with me.
No, I'm going to give them to Andreas, who is our director today, because it is his 26th birthday today, so he's got a very nice box of licorice all sorts.
Happy birthday, Andreas.
Yes, and thank you very much for those licorice all sorts. It's a very, very thoughtful gesture, and
lovely.
Yeah, and I still like them.
Yeah, there you go.
Years.
It is a brilliant book. Any viewers who haven't read it, Finding Margaret, I highly recommend it.
Now,
I've bought a number of copies, in fact.
You have, actually, and I think I made you pay for all of them.
I think you did, Andrew, but never mind.
Times are hard, you know, GB News
to a good cause,
exactly.
I think.
Now, this is a really important GB News exclusive. The former Supreme Court judge, she was the head of the Supreme Court, Baroness Brenda Hale, who has previously claimed there is no such thing as biological sex, said this while speaking at an event at Durham University.
Could I just think of an answer to the what question?
Yes, of course you can.
Do I wish I'd been asked? And I think I've thought of a question, which is there a case that you would have liked to have sat on but you didn't?
And what's the answer to that question?
4 Women Scotland.
Ooh.
I'd have liked to have sat on that. Yeah, but there we go.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, well done to Miriam, because Miriam brought that in. Good exclusive, because that's a pretty significant intervention.
Of course,
by
and she's become very famous. She ruled on the prorogation of Parliament.
Said it should never have happened.
Exactly, when Boris Johnson wanted a general election. And, of course, she ruled that Parliament had to have a vote on triggering Article 50, even though British people had voted for Brexit. So quite a significant, influential
Brexiteers accused her of trying to sabotage Brexit.
They did,
she
indeed.
said she was just enforcing the law of the land.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, the 4 Women Scotland judgment was where campaigners from Scotland brought the case to the Supreme Court, who said that sex means biological sex for the purpose of the Equality Act. In other words, common sense. Now, of course, there's no evidence at all that Lady Hale would have ruled any differently on that case. She was just saying that she would have liked to be there at the judgment.
Because it's such a significant moment in our law.
Exactly. But, of course, lots of people asked why on earth 4 Women Scotland had to challenge this ruling that transgender women could be considered to be legally female. Most people would say, well, a man's a man, a woman's a woman. So what we're asking really is, do judges hold more power than Parliament? Are we ruled more by judges than by MPs who supposedly...
I fear we are, and I think it's become much more marked under the current Prime Minister, who I've always said is a lawyer, not a leader. And we know one of the most important people in his government has been the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, another human rights lawyer.
And, of course, it was Blair who set this train in motion by creating the Supreme Court in the process, taking that top judgment outside of Parliament and giving it
it used to be done
powers.
by the law lords who sat in the House of Lords.
Indeed. Well, the director for Women Scotland, Susan Smith, joins us now. Susan, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, of course, it's important to say that there's no evidence that Lady Hale would have reached a different judgment, but nevertheless, it's interesting that she picked out that case as the one that she would have liked to be part of.
Yeah, I don't think she could have reached a different judgment. I mean, obviously, it was unanimous. There were 5 judges on the Supreme Court, and they all agreed that in order to have clarity in the law, sex had to mean biological sex. And I think when you drill down and look at the ruling and all of the various composite parts of the Equality Act, it's impossible to read through it on anything other than sex means sex. So I think she would have had to have come to the same conclusion. I can only imagine that she thinks it was a hugely significant case, which is flattering in a way, but it's also quite disturbing because I'm not sure we should have ever got to a position where the definition of women was so controversial and necessitated such a landmark ruling.
But also, Susan, it underlined that we've seen since that ruling how impotent and weak Parliament is, because it took the government at least a year to publish its guidance on the Supreme Court ruling, when, in my view, Parliament should have made the distinction in the first place. We didn't need judges to make that to come to that conclusion.
No, but we did need the judges in practice because the politicians were so terrified of this. And that's a damning indictment of the quality of parliamentarians we have currently. And I agree that law should be made by Parliament and not by judges. But I think the problem we have at the moment is that we have very inadequate systems in place, and we have a real issue with parliamentary authority. We've seen it in Scotland. We have a lot of problems in Scotland that are partly caused by the fact we've no revising chamber. Our committee system is even worse than in Westminster because its committees are structured around who's got the largest amount of seats in the Holyrood Parliament. So, of course, that just gives the government power over the committees. So we've got issues, and I think there's a democratic deficit. And parliamentarians are elected to do a job, and they're not doing their job, and they're being cowardly. And it's very interesting now that there's all these MPs who are signing this absolutely ridiculous motion that Nadia Whittam's put forward. That's not going to change the law. But their MPs, if they actually want to change the law, they can go out and make the case to change the law. But they're scared to do that, so they want to do it all by stealth.
And we're seeing, Susan, that even though this judgment was made and it was crystal clear, some of our institutions are still not following the guidance. We were reading just over the weekend that many NHS hospitals are still going to allow biological men who say they're transgender to use female-only wards. So in a way, although the victory that you won was significant and very helpful, it hasn't been applied in all of our institutions.
No, and there are still a lot of organisations who are going around completely misrepresenting what this means and what we won. We've got organisations in Scotland who are paid for by our government who are pumping out a lot of misinformation and causing confusion. And it's really, really straightforward. And obviously, we've just won another case on prisons. And that just completely reinforced what the Supreme Court said, that if you have facilities divided by sex, it has to be male and female. And there's no opt-out, there's no workaround. And all that's going to happen to those organisations who are continuing to flout the law is that they will get dragged back to court. But it's not a good way to sort this out. I can't believe there's this attitude now amongst publicly funded organisations like the NHS that they can just disapply the law when they feel like it.
Indeed. Well, Susan Smith, Director for For Women Scotland, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
That is the point, is it? These are publicly funded bodies, accountable. They are meant to be accountable to the public, ignoring the Supreme Court.
It seems that they can pick and choose the laws
that they want. Is not enforcing the law. Despite the ruling, eventually, from Bridget Phillipson, who, apart from being Education Secretary, is the Equalities Minister.
It's just extraordinary. The state of affairs, we need judges to tell you the difference between a man and a woman. Very much lacking in common sense. Well, GB News has contacted Lady Hale for comment, but we have yet to receive a response.
Now, moving on, the government has announced it will appoint the first ever National Maternity Commissioner. That's following the Nottingham Hospital review, which found repeated and, frankly, shocking failures in NHS maternity care.
Well, the Amos review, which gathered evidence from more than 10,000 people, found that women were not routinely being listened to.
The independent MP for Canterbury, Rosie Duffield, joins us now. Rosie Duffield, good morning and welcome to GB News. Is this appointment of a commissioner, is it a gimmick or do you think it is a significant moment?
I think it's important, and when the APPG did our report in May 2024, it was one of our many recommendations. I don't know why it's been ignored. The Health Secretary in the last government, Victoria Atkins, had promised to implement most of our recommendations, but then we had an election, we've had 2 more Health Secretaries. I've been an MP for 9 years, so this is my 9th Health Secretary. By the end of this year, we'll be on our 10th Health Secretary, I imagine. And so all these promises are great, but, you know, as this regime winds up, how do we know these things are going to carry on?
Now, Rosie, there's certainly widespread consensus that maternity care has to improve. But do you think that a commissioner is the right way to go about it? Will this person have statutory responsibility, have statutory powers? How will they be able to change what is an enormous national service?
Yeah, you're right, Miriam. I think that has to happen. You know, a lot of the families are still calling for a statutory public inquiry. I know the argument is that that costs a lot of money and takes a long time, but I cannot see why that can't be started to satisfy the families that this is a real deep dive, even if it takes a few years, and also implement all of the recommendations from so many reports that have gone before and are still being rolled out. And I think the maternity commissioner has to be someone independent. Sadly, Donna Ockenden has ruled herself out this morning, and I think that's because she has so many other inquiries to do, but it needs to be someone like that who's entirely independent of the government so that she does, or he, have statutory powers, as you say.
Just remind us what that review found in this Nottingham Trust about maternity services. Why were women being so badly let down?
It was absolutely horrendous. I've read so many horrendous reports, but I think this one was particularly shocking. It was just the callous attitude towards the parents, some of the comments, the absolutely unbelievably terrible way that some of the deceased babies were treated. I mean, you know, once you've read that report, you can't forget those things. And it was clear that this particular health secretary was very moved by that, actually, when he made a statement on it last week. I think he approached it with a really sensitive approach. But again, he's not going to be around for long. That's the reality. And it's all very well politicians wringing their hands and getting upset, but families have been let down for years, decades, and longer than we think, probably, and we need to see change.
You always think maternity care also ought to be among the most compassionate of them all, Rosie.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if not showing compassion to families that are going through any degree of birth trauma or difficulty, then when on earth would you show that? And I think that's the problem. We found in our report in 2024 that there was a postcode lottery. Sadly, that wasn't mentioned in Baroness Amos's report today. I think a lot of people had a lot of hope for this report, but it couldn't go as deep and as far as people thought that it should. And that's because so many families have been let down so consistently for years.
Rosie Duffield, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's the independent MP for Canterbury, Rosie Duffield.
I wonder if she'll go back into the Labour Party under new Labour leader.
We didn't get a chance to ask her that, did we?
Next time. Up next.
This morning, Sir Keir Starmer will set out his long-delayed strategy to keep Britain safe and secure. Our incoming Prime Minister Andy Burnham hasn't even seen it yet.
We'll be going through that and more with Dr Renee Hundekamp and her favourite sparring partner, Kevin Maguire of The Mirror. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. There they are. Are they sparring already? Bet they are.
Do you trust what you're being told? Good, because neither do I.
Those are just facts.
I'm Alex Armstrong, and on my show, we'll expose the spin.
Well, I want to answer that, because you didn't let me last time, because you always speak over me.
The broken promises.
To deny that is denying the truth.
And the hypocrisy.
It needs to stop. You think we can allow?
Politics, policy, parliament. Nothing is off limits. No sugarcoating, no fear of offence, just the truth laid bare. Tune in every Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. for Alex Armstrong Tonight, only on GB News, Britain's news channel. 5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Got our panel, GB News contributor GP Rennie Hunderkamp and Kevin Maguire from Pearce and Maguire podcast in the studio. Dr. Renee, nobody better to talk about this major review into the NHS maternity service, because as a doctor, you know all about it. This has been done by Baroness Amos, a former Labour leader House of Lords. It almost talks of cruelty at times.
I mean, and it does talk of cruelty. And my fear is that it will just be another inquiry and nothing will change, because we've seen time and time again. We all know that maternity services are horrific. I always think we need to start from the standpoint that being pregnant and having a baby is still the most dangerous thing a woman does in the Western world. It's got better, obviously, than when we used to be, underdeveloped, but it still is very dangerous. But the problem is, and I said to you in the break, I've done this job, and it is the most all-encompassing job emotionally that I have ever done. When I first did it, I couldn't speak to anyone when I got home for 3 weeks, whereas I just let it all out and just tried to cope with what I'd seen. There are periods of nothingness when nothing's happening, and then there are 3 hours of absolute full-on chaos where there are babies being born in corridors because there isn't anywhere for them. You run down and there's a woman having a C-section in the anaesthetic room because the theatres are full. Every doctor just being told to scrub and get in because there's not enough people. It is massively understaffed, especially midwives, I have to say. And I do still think there is this chasm between doctors and midwives, where midwives want to just get on with it and not involve doctors, and by the time doctors get involved it's almost too late because of this,
Is that because the midwives think they know best?
I think it's because we did this, let's go back to natural childbirth, and you don't need a doctor for natural childbirth. So if there's a doctor, it's not natural anymore. I do think there is some cruelty involved. I experienced it myself when I was 21, which was nearly 4 decades ago. This is not a new problem. When I turned up at a hospital on New Year's morning and nobody was interested in me, I actually had my baby 4 hours later with no one in the room. Wow. And that was 4 decades ago.
Do you think that's partly because pregnancy, unlike many of the other things that you go to hospital for, is not a medical condition? It's not an illness, it's a perfectly natural state of affairs. And so do you think there's this kind of feeling amongst midwives and other health staff that women should, it's normal, millions of women have done this before, you just get on with it?
I think there probably is that. I also think, and I think this is not just across maternity, we have actually pushed people, doctors, midwives, nurses, to a state where they are cruel, not deliberately.
Because they're so overwhelmed.
They have compassion, lost because they're not valued in the NHS. And when you don't value your workforce, they end up so unhappy in the role that actually compassion goes out the window, whether they realise it or not. And, I fear that a powerful maternity commissioner will be spread so far and wide that nothing will change. We need more than one. You almost need one in every single trust to walk around that maternity ward every single day and see what is going on, because it's such a vast problem. We need a massive recruitment drive. That these midwives are run ragged. When they're seeing to 3 women and they're running between rooms, that
and no wonder mistakes are made.
And then the woman feels devalued because where's my midwife? Why can't I see her now? Well, why is that woman more important than me? There's so many problems, so many gaps through which people can fall.
We talked to Jeremy Hunt earlier, former health secretary, Kevin, a long-serving health secretary, and he said this has been a problem, as Renaud said, for years, and he said that the pregnant woman should have a relationship with a midwife right from the beginning, as opposed to meeting her for the first time in the delivery room.
Yeah, Jeremy Hunt, Britain's longest-serving health secretary, who squeezed the life out of the NHS financially. But it is kind of shocking. Just listening to you there, Rennie, it's kind of horrific. And my experience has been the other end, as it were, the birth of my own children. And you can see how people can become desensitised, staff, if you're pulled around and you're working all the time. And it's an incredibly stressful moment, both for the... there's 2 lives here. There's the life of the mother and the new life that's being created. And you would have thought it would be one of those services that should be a Rolls-Royce service in the NHS, rather than being so overstretched.
Kevin, also, we were talking to Rosie Duffield, who's now an independent MP, who pointed out she's been an MP for 9 years. There's been 9 health secretaries in that time. That is a shocking fact. Shocking.
It is, but you can, housing's the same, all those areas. There is too much churn in ministers. I remember Tony Blair, in his first government, kept the same Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary, Education Secretary, Chancellor.
Perhaps there's an argument for health, which isn't a house or a train. Perhaps there's an argument in health for it to be a non-MP role. Somebody at the top of it looking at the future, a 10, a 15, a 20-year plan that they work collaboratively.
But they tried that with
cross-party.
NHS England, and the trouble is when you get people who have only one job, or that they are only focused on one area and they're not elected, it's then difficult to make the decisions that are about allocating scarce resources, and it becomes only about that service, where of course the government actually has to divide.
But I listened to James Murray this morning on various other interviews that he did, and he said, there's definitely a toxic culture, there's definitely a culture of cover-up, and women and babies are dying, and it must change. What is that? That's just word salad. It's meaningless. Things must change.
Well,
we've known things must change.
It's the appointment of the commissioner who will have to have the powers to follow through. But I think you get far more accountability and change by getting onto your MP and ministers than you ever would with an executive running a
But this was the Tories were going to do this before the election. They lost the election. 2 years on, it's still not happened.
Yeah. Well, I think it's
unforgivable.
Sometimes, though, you need a review to find exactly what is going wrong, which hopefully the Valerie Baroness Amos
It's not the first review, though, Kevin, is it?
Then, no, but they've had piecemeal reviews. This isn't meant to be the big overarching review, and then you've got to follow it through. As the suffragettes always said, it's deeds, not words.
Do you have any... You're sceptical, aren't you, Renee?
I really am. I'm not sure. I think it's a bit like the NHS as a whole, that unless you actually break it down to the floor and rebuild it from the start, you're just putting plasters on, and those plasters are not going to work, and this is serious.
There's a problem if you break something down to the floor, as you say. You've got to provide the services while you're doing that, and then everyone's just fighting
so you do it trust by trust.
And structures. That's why you have to have people... You've got midwives there, you've got docs there, you need more, certainly, midwives, and you've got to change how they operate in that culture. And you hope it starts by managers and the leading medics in those trusts going around and say, look, women are, and Valerie Amos says this, feel they're not being heard. Start hearing them. We've got to explain to them better.
We also need to
incredibly stressful. And a lot of them have asked for help.
We're going to have to leave it there because we're going to go and listen to the new Defence Secretary, Dan Jarvis, before the Prime Minister tells us all about his defence investment plan. For now, anyway.
Of those who defend it. The central purpose of this plan is to get the kit and technology that our armed forces need so they can fight and deter now and in the years ahead. Credit goes to the Prime Minister, and not only for getting us here today. On matters of national security, I've seen him make tough decisions, and always with conviction and assurance. Under his leadership, Britain has proved itself a reliable partner and a trusted ally. With our help, Ukraine's forces are still in the fight and fighting with determination and momentum. We were first out of the door to support a peace deal in Ukraine, same again to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He made the right choices on the issues that counted, and he also knows that in the end, it is our people that matter most. They win wars, they preserve peace. Now, life in the armed forces isn't always easy, and I know from personal experience what it can be like to raise a young family on the patch. It's often the small things that really make the difference. We've still got some way to go on improving service life, but I know that what we've done so far is really being felt and making a difference. Awarding 3 above-inflation pay rises, extending free childcare, and raising the standard of military family homes. Our personnel are today better supported. And through this defence investment plan, we will make them better prepared. This plan recognises the hard truth that the conflict in Ukraine completely upended the way of war. In response, today, we're committing the UK's biggest ever investment in drone warfare. More money for hybrid Royal Navy, more money to increase the British Army's lethality, and more money for the next generation Royal Air Force. This plan reflects both the realities of future warfare and the principles that have kept us safe for generations. We will strengthen our nuclear deterrent and bolster NATO. Now, I know that there is more work to do, and we've made a commitment to our allies as they did to us. And under this government, that promise will be met. Let me end by saying that our people remain our most important asset. This defence investment plan is for them. I have now a responsibility to make it work, and my promise to every single member of our armed forces is that I will seek to serve them as well as they serve us. Now, let me welcome someone who's been absolutely fundamental to this plan and to the funding supporting it. Please welcome the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves.
Hello, everybody, and it's a real honour to be here today. A few years ago, when I was Shadow Chancellor, I wrote and I spoke about the importance of security and resilience for economic growth, and also the importance of a strong economy for our national security. It's an approach that I called securonomics. That idea has become increasingly real and valid in my 2 years as Chancellor. Last year, I made the decision in the national interest to reprioritise aid spending towards defence and achieve the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. That was the right choice because the world has changed. National security is economic security. Today, we uplift defence spending further. An additional £15 billion worth of funding by, again, reprioritising spending across government. Last week, I was in Gdansk for the Ukraine Recovery Conference and in Kyiv, meeting the Ukraine Defence and Finance Ministers and innovative Ukrainian and UK businesses. I saw the amazing resilience and bravery of the Ukrainian people in the face of Russian aggression. I was humbled by their spirit and their stories. And I was reminded of why the work that we're doing today is so important. Because defence and readiness, for now, are not remote contingencies. They're not far-away possibilities. They are an immediate and pressing requirement. And by defending ourselves, we defend our allies and we defend our values. Our NATO partners, our Ukrainian allies and our European allies. I want to pay tribute to the Defence Secretary for all the work that he's done in just a few weeks to deliver today's Defence Investment Plan, and also to the Chief of the Defence Staff. They are prioritising the needs and fulfilling the responsibility of our country. I also want to recognise, Keir, how important you have been to this work right from the beginning. You'll hear from the Prime Minister in a moment. The defence of our country in an age of insecurity has been a defining pillar of his leadership, and his absolute moral clarity in the face of the threats that we face as a nation will go down as part of his legacy. So it is my honour to introduce my friend, our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you, Dan, and welcome to everybody here this morning. It's very good to see you, and particularly to see the representatives from our armed services here in the audience. And can I, through you, thank all of those who serve our country and have served our country. And let me say, standing here, it is really inspiring to see the work that you do here at Malloy, building capabilities like this workhorse drone that's being used in Ukraine, and this incredible heavy lift. I think that's the biggest drone I've seen, the heavy lift capability, which will soon be deployed to Ukraine. That gives you just a glimpse and a sense of what's going on the front line in Ukraine, which is so important. So thank you for all the work that's being done here, for the part that you are playing, together, obviously, with brilliant companies right across the United Kingdom in defence of our nation. And that is what I'm here to talk to you about today. And the first place I wanted to start is by saying this, that as Prime Minister, you get to meet people from all walks of life, up and down the United Kingdom. And I know how worried they are about the state of our world. They see the wars in Ukraine and in the Middle East impacting on our stability, driving up the cost of living. And they're feeling tired at being at the mercy of events beyond our shores. We see countries that are arming and tensions that are rising, a more dangerous and volatile world than at any time for decades. We see the horrendous human toll of these conflicts, which cuts across our values of justice and sovereignty, and that simple British impulse that bullies and dictators cannot be allowed to push people around. We also know that these threats are not remote. We see foreign states targeting our nation as well. Thugs hired by foreign powers conducting violence, vandalism and arson on our streets. Disinformation aimed at sowing division and stoking disorder, spreading lies and undermining our democracy. Russian ships targeting the underwater cables that carry the data on which modern life depends. We also see on the battlefield in Ukraine that the very nature of conflict is changing before our eyes. Despite having a limited navy, limited traditional air power and limited armour, Ukrainian forces have destroyed the Black Sea Fleet. They've struck deep into Russian territory and stopped the advance of one of the biggest armies in the world. Now, they've done that through sheer courage, yes, but also by embracing technology. They've integrated drones into their fighting like never before, understanding that the ability to innovate and produce at speed and at scale is more vital than ever to military power, and that AI will accelerate this transformation even further. Against that background, NATO is more vital than ever. Yes, we recognise that things have changed here too. While the US remains our key ally, I have been clear that in order to sustain NATO, the most successful military alliance the world has ever seen, European nations must take more primary responsibility for their own defence. These are the changes and the challenges which have defined my premiership and that will continue to shape our times. And look, my view has been the same since day one. We must stand more firmly on our own 2 feet. We must do what it takes to meet this new world head-on, to keep our country safe and seize the opportunities that come from investing in our sovereign strength. That is what we're doing. That's why we have reversed at last the corrosive hollowing out of our armed forces. And it's why we're transforming a defence programme that, frankly, for too long has been underfunded and unsuited to the threats that we face. I've also been clear since day one that we do this not because we want war, but because we want to avoid war. We lived through Iraq. We learned from those mistakes, and we don't want to repeat them. I showed that when I chose not to join the war in Iran. We want our people to be able to live in a world defined by peace, stability, and the rule of law. But the paradox of peace is that when the world is arming and aggression is rising, the best way to avoid war is to prepare for it. The best way to defend is to deter, to have the strength to make your adversaries think again before they act. And that is what we are delivering. Last year, we published our Strategic Defence Review, setting out the capabilities we need for a changed world. And today, I am proud to publish our new Defence Investment Plan. This plan delivers on last year's review. But in light of the rapidly changing world, the changing nature of conflict, and the imminent and growing threats we face, it goes further still. I want to thank the Defence Secretary and CDS here and the Chancellor for their work to sharpen and strengthen the plan in recent weeks. So we can set out today how we will transform our armed services, whilst also giving industry the certainty that they need to invest, and giving our allies clarity on our intent ahead of the NATO summit next week. This plan represents our best judgment of what the country needs to meet this moment, and it is a platform on which I know my successor will build. Now, unlike previous governments, we have taken care to fully cost this plan, examining the defence budget line by line. And that is vital, because it's how you expose the necessary trade-offs and expose the arguments that just don't stack up. You have some people in this debate who underplay the threat and deny the need to prioritise defence and security. You also have those who say you can fund defence without making sacrifices in other areas of capital spending. And you have those arguing that we can just raise borrowing, put it all on the never-never. But let's be clear, defence bonds are just borrowing by another name. We've looked at this very carefully. But the fact is, doing this through borrowing would push interest rates higher, at a time when £1 in every 10 already goes on paying debt interest. And this government has fought hard to bring the public finances under control, and it has paid off, helping to bring inflation and mortgage rates down. We should not sacrifice that now. Because this is the point that often gets missed. Strong public finances are a fundamental part of our strength in this world. Lose control of them, we're not just poorer, we're much less secure. slash funding to our public services in favour of defence, and we would be fundamentally weaker as a nation, more fractured as a society, less able to defend ourselves when our enemies prey on social division. So the hard truth is there are no easy answers. But the settlement I'm setting out today is the right choice for the country. It delivers the decisive action we need on defence in a way that is within our fiscal rules and that will not take resources away from day-to-day spending on frontline services like health and education. Instead, it is funded by reallocating spending from across government departments, reallocating capital budgets by 1 penny in every pound, while still maintaining public investment at the highest sustained levels since the 1970s. It means departments making better use of assets, like underused land. And it means those departments with the largest capital budgets contributing more. Therefore, some capital projects, for example on roads and energy, which are important but not immediately vital, will no longer go ahead as planned. But this is about taking the necessary choices, the right choices, to protect our nation. It is because we've taken these hard-edged decisions that we are able to increase our spending on defence. Now, we are already delivering the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the 1980s, £270 billion over the spending review period. And I can announce today that under the Defence Investment Plan, we are increasing this by a further £15 billion, setting a new record of spending almost £300 billion over the next 4 years to back our armed forces and strengthen our national security. Now, it's true to say there's been a huge focus on the numbers here, but let me take a moment just to set them out in a little bit more detail. Before we came into office, so 2 years ago, this country spent £54 billion a year on defence. We are taking this to almost £80 billion a year by 2029. That is a real terms increase of 27%. From spending 2.3% of GDP on defence in 2024, we are raising it to 2.7%, putting us on a trajectory to reach 3% in the next Parliament, which must be the #1 priority at the next spending review. At last year's NATO summit, I committed to spend 5% of GDP on our wider security, covering things like energy security and critical infrastructure as well as defence. The Defence Investment Plan, published today, takes us to 4.2% under that commitment. By any measure, this is a huge historic shift for our nation and a legacy in which I take pride. And we must use this investment wisely, as I know that in the past, defence spending has sometimes been seen as a bottomless pit. People see the money going in, but they don't feel the benefits. So this time must be different. We can't just spend more, we've got to spend better. That includes driving real reforms within the Ministry of Defence to get greater value from our investment, accelerating innovation and procurement, and reducing non-military spending, for example, on civil service staff. We have examined every penny under this plan to make sure it delivers real, positive change for our country. And we can see that it will do so in 3 ways. First, it will make the British people safer. It focuses our resources squarely on the readiness of our armed forces, reversing the cuts of recent years, prioritising the availability of our forces and assets, rebuilding ammunition stockpiles, ensuring we are ready to fight and defend our nation and better prepared to win. It will also make the British people safer by driving a generational transformation of our armed forces. learning the lessons of Ukraine in order to modernise our military, equipped to fight the wars both of today and tomorrow. And we're backing this by putting in more than £5 billion into drones and autonomous weapons. That is the largest ever UK investment in this technology. That means we will build a new hybrid Royal Navy, so that when our frigates move to intercept a threat to British interests, like a Russian ship in our waters, for example, they will do so with outriders, uncrewed ships, above and below the surface, their AI systems working in unison with our warships, operating as a single integrated force. This will be joined by the next generation RAF, Typhoons flying with autonomous wingmen, making them invisible to enemy detection. And we will build an army that is 10 times more lethal, with attack drones flying alongside our Apache helicopters, a new fleet of surveillance drones collecting intelligence and finding targets, and a surge in low-cost one-way attack drones, which have proved so effective in Ukraine. On top of this, we are investing in long-range missiles, armoured vehicles, and counter-drone defence systems. We're investing in £500 million in new technology and capabilities for our commandos and our special forces, which are already the envy of the world. And we're investing £115 million to raise our defences against the threats of AI. This is about harnessing cutting-edge technology on every front to multiply our strength and defend our nation. Second, this plan will benefit the British people because it uses defence spending to strengthen our economy, creating almost 60,000 jobs. Now, our motto here is back British, bent wherever possible on backing British workers, businesses and innovators, delivering a defence dividend, which brings SMEs and start-ups into the defence supply chain and pays off in every region and every community. And the fact is, defence jobs are different. They're high-skilled and well-paid. They offer career path, training and a greater sense of meaning, the chance to step into our national story and play your part in full. That means pride in yourself and in your community. You know, towards the end of last year, I was up at the BAE plant in Wharton in Lancashire, and I met a young lad called Jack. He works there as an apprentice, following in his dad's footsteps. And because of the Typhoon contract that this government agreed, we didn't just secure his job, but his dad's job too, and that of the whole workforce. And it's in moments like that where you can see that someone's future has just opened up before them. That is what my politics has always been about. And that's what this investment will deliver. And to make sure that we keep winning contracts like that, I can announce today that we're creating a new £50 billion defence export facility to support British defence businesses to compete, to create more jobs, pride and opportunity up and down the country. That is the largest expansion of UK export finance support in its 100-year history, and a once-in-a-generation boost to the British defence industry. Third, this plan will benefit our nation because it enables us to strengthen our international leadership and build a more European NATO. Now, this is not to the exclusion of the US, but to strengthen the transatlantic alliance which keeps our country safe. This demands a decisive strengthening of European capabilities. That is why we're developing deep precision strike weapons with Germany. It's why we're building frigates with Norway to hunt Russian submarines when they come near our waters. And it's why we're going further on the Defence Investment Plan, allocating £400 million for the UK's contribution to the multilateral defence mechanism to finance and procure defence equipment with our allies, and support a path to achieving our NATO spending targets. Moreover, we are renewing our commitment to build Tempest fighter jets with an £8.6 billion investment under the Global Combat Air Programme with Italy and Japan. Now, this is about developing sixth-generation stealth fighters that will secure our skies for decades to come and rebuild the foundation of a sovereign British aircraft industry. I can also confirm that we are bringing our investment in renewing our nuclear deterrent to £64 billion, a truly national effort, building new submarines, developing a new sovereign warhead, and buying 12 F-35A fighter jets, maintaining our role in guaranteeing British and European security, and leaving our country in a much better and stronger place than we found it. Now, before I finish, I just want to say a word about Ukraine. I think back to my visit to Kyiv at the beginning of the war and the horror I saw that day, the evidence of atrocities, photographs of murdered civilians, blindfolded, hands tied behind their backs, shot in the head. I heard the stories of the survivors, and I've carried that with me ever since. I swore to myself that I would do all I can to back Ukraine in this fight, because it is right and just, and because it's an attack on the liberties and freedoms that we have always fought for. And be in no doubt, the outcome of this war will shape our lives for decades to come. If Russia were to win in Ukraine, Putin would not stop there, but turn his gaze to other allies, bringing even greater instability to our continent, even greater impacts on our security and the cost of living, and an even greater need to mobilise yet more resources for our defence. But the good news is that Ukraine is holding strong. They are increasingly able to push Russia back on the battlefield. And there are clear signs that as Russia's losses mount and their economy struggles, the mood in Moscow is turning against Putin's war. So this is the moment to ramp up the pressure, backing Ukraine's defence and turning the screws on Russia's economy. And that is what we're doing. And the Defence Investment Plan will maintain our support in full. I have been proud to stand with Ukraine and with President Zelensky over the last 2 years, and to lead the coalition of the willing, together with France and Germany, to support a just and lasting peace, part of our work to restore Britain's standing in the world. It is a great credit to this nation that every Prime Minister since the invasion has stood full square behind Ukraine, and I have no doubt that will continue for as long as it takes. Because, look, moments like this ask fundamental questions of all of us. Not just about how we respond, but about who we are as a nation and who we choose to be. And I am clear, it is simply not in our nature to shrink inward, resigned to mere passengers buffeted by events. The Britain I believe in finds its greatness in these moments. In times of crisis, we stand tall. We summon that British spirit of grit and resolve and seize the moment with both hands, proud of our values, proud of who we are. And I see that greatness in the people I meet. I see it in the crews of our nuclear submarines that I've met coming off their long patrols. One man returning home to meet his 4-month-old baby for the first time. I see it in our troops defending NATO's eastern flank, in our Royal Marines protecting the northern frontier. I see it in our carrier crews, who are out there right now deterring Russia in the North Atlantic. I see it in our RAF pilots, putting themselves in harm's way to defend our allies in the Gulf. But I also see that greatness in all those who stand behind the front line. The workers in our NHS, our public services, our energy sector, our apprentices, engineers, building the technologies that we need, all of those on whom our national resilience depends. That's why I know we will continue to rise to this moment, not just to weather the coming storms, but to use this moment to reach towards a better future, the stronger, fairer country that the British people deserve, that I have sought to build. And this plan is a decisive step on that journey. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I'm now going to take a number of questions from the media, starting with Carl Dinnan from ITV. Carl.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Carl Dinnan from ITV News. You have said in the past that Russia could attack NATO as soon as 2030. Can you, hand on heart, say that this plan has enough in it by 2030 to deter if we can and to fight if we must?
Yes, I can. That is because of the increase in defence spending that we put in place, announced last year, already in place, which was the single biggest sustained increase since the 1980s, and the fact that this defence investment plan builds on that. And it's not just the amount of money, it is also the capabilities. We've learnt a lot from Ukraine, actually also from Iran as well, about the capability that is needed in order to confront countries like Russia. That is exactly what's going on in Ukraine. So I am confident in that. I'm also confident because we're working more closely with our European allies on this. One of the arguments I've made repeatedly over the last 2 years is that European countries need to do more. If we're to be persuasive in that argument, and I think we are and can be, UK needs to show a leadership role, to be a trusted ally. A country that is looked upon for leadership. I believe we have built that, and that gives us the ability over the coming years to stand on that platform and work with our allies. That's why I was in Berlin last week with the E5 countries. It's why I'll be in NATO next week at the summit, working with all NATO members, and why I saw the Secretary-General yesterday, where we discussed this very thing. Thank you very much, Carl. Chris Mason from BBC News.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason, BBC News. One of the authors of the Strategic Defence Review, General Sir Richard Barrons, has said we're not keeping up with our allies and we're certainly not keeping up with our enemies when it comes to defence spending. Is he wrong?
Look, what I would point to is this, that we inherited an armed forces that were hollowed out. We have already taken, before today, the decision to put in the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the 1980s. That's for 45 years. So that gives you a sense of the scale and the urgency that we brought to this in just 2 years. This defence investment plan is now on top of that, a further £15 billion, in particular looking at the capabilities that we need. The Strategic Defence Review was really important. There are further things we've learnt even since then, looking at the development of the way in which wars are fought. Even these drones, I've been to Kyiv a number of times now, and each time I go, it is clear the capability is changing on a weekly and monthly basis. So we've put all of that thinking into this defence investment plan. Now, look, there will always be those that argue that even more should be spent, but I have to make the right judgments on the capability that I think is right for our country to meet the threats, not just of today, but of tomorrow. And that is what this defence investment plan does. And I think anyone sort of standing back and objectively would say this is a massive step forward if you take what we've already done, put the defence investment plan alongside it, and the fact that it's strategic. It's not just funding today's capability, but tomorrow's capability as well, combined with the work that we've done to work with other countries on this, because the only way forward is to make sure that all Europeans step up together, and that requires us as a country to show the leadership that has been shown over the last 2 years and to have the ability to galvanise and bring other countries together. It is no coincidence that the two coalitions that have been set up in the last 2 years have been British-led. The coalition in Ukraine, which I set up with President Macron, and now Germany is a key leader in it as well, and then the other coalition to deal with the response to the Iran conflict, again, UK leadership alongside French leadership. And across Europe and beyond, other countries are looking to us to show that leadership and that resolve, and that's what we've been able to do. Thank you, Chris. Beth from Sky Sports, Beth Rigby.
Sky Sports. I wish it was. I wish it was. Thank you.
Sky News, Beth, not Sky Sports, but I'm sure you could do that as well.
From the beginning of your premiership, you have prioritised Britain's role on the world stage, but your defence plan is a year late. It cost you your defence secretary and has no timetable for meeting the new NATO commitment. By getting it across the line, you have made a start to your legacy on defence. But do you acknowledge that it will be your successor who will need to secure it? And has Andy Burnham given you assurances that he will increase defence funding in the next spending review? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Beth. Let me just put it in this way. I think a test of any Prime Minister is whether they leave the country in a better state than they found it. And if you look at our country, that is undoubtedly a case on the economy, undoubtedly a case on public services, in particular the NHS, but also undoubtedly a case on defence and security and international leadership. We are in a much better state now than we were when we took over 2 years ago. And that isn't just measured in the amount of money we're putting into defence, the record investment that went in as a result of the announcement I made last year, the addition to that today, but also the fact that other countries now look to the United Kingdom as a leader on defence and security. We're the first to be consulted. We are the country that others want to work with, and I'm proud of that. We do leave the country in a better state. As for the future, I have no doubt that all Labour governments will remain that #1 commitment to our defence and security. Labour governments have always done that and always will do that, and I'm absolutely certain, therefore, that this is a platform on which whoever comes after me can build, and I'm proud that it is, and I will do everything within my power to make sure that any transition is orderly and that we go from strength to strength, and that is what I'm endeavouring to do. Thank you very much, Beth. Andy Bell from Channel 5.
Thank you very much, Andy Bell, 5 News. Just to return to that point, Prime Minister, can you be a bit more explicit? Has Andy Burnham seen this plan before it's made public? Has he signed it off? Or is this very much your plan and you're just telling him you should stick to it?
Well, Andy, the way I put it is this. I don't think anybody would argue that the Strategic Defence Review was needed because any Prime Minister would want to know what are the capabilities I have at my disposal now, what are the capabilities I'm going to need in the future. The Defence Investment Plan builds on that by setting out what those capabilities will be, how they're going to be costed. So that is something which any Labour Prime Minister would want to stand behind. It's a platform any Labour Prime Minister would want to stand on, because the first duty of any Prime Minister is the defence and security of the country, the first duty, and I think everybody knows that and accepts that. What I will now do, and am doing, is to ensure that the transition to a new Prime Minister is orderly, with minimum disruption, and that there is a good, solid platform to build on. We've done that over the 2 years, and I shall faithfully do that in the remaining weeks, every day ensuring that we improve on the situation and that I can genuinely say, hand on heart, that I've passed on a better country than one I inherited, and that I can make sure that my successor has every prospect of success, which is what I want more than anything. Thank you very much, Andy. I've got Paul McNamara from Channel 4, please.
Oh, hello. Morning, Prime Minister. You keep on coming back to the line that you've increased defence spending by the largest amounts since the Cold War, and nobody's disputing that. But what former military chiefs and experts are arguing is that even with that, and even with the extra money, given the threats that the UK faces right now, it is still not enough, including General Sir Richard Barrons, who you entrusted to write last year's defence review. Are you willfully ignoring their advice, or do you just think these people with decades of war-fighting experience are wrong?
Well, I'm glad you began that by saying everybody acknowledges the huge increase we've put into defence spending, because it is important that we start there. The highest sustained increase since the Cold War or since the 1980s, depending which way you want to measure it, that's nearly half a century. The biggest sustained increase for nearly half a century in the history of this country. That is a huge step forward, £270 billion over the spending review. With today's defence investment plan, that means that over the next 4 years, that will take it to a record 300 or nearly £300 billion. That is a huge amount of money. What we've done through the strategic review and the Defence Investment Plan, which, as I say, has been sharpened even in recent weeks. And I'm very grateful to the Defence Secretary for all the work that he has done, the Chief of Defence Staff as well, alongside the Chancellor, to sharpen it, to make sure that, in a fast-moving world, it really is going to deliver the capability that we need for the future. And that is what it does. That is my judgment call on this. Of course, I hugely respect those with great experience and great service. There will always be those that say, whatever the sum is, frankly, it's not enough. Whatever sum I'd announced this morning, there would always be somebody who says that's not enough. I have a job as Prime Minister to get this judgment right in terms of the amount of money that is spent, the capability that we need as a country, and that is why I'm 100% confident in the plan that we've put forward this morning. I'm very pleased at the work that's been done in recent weeks to sharpen and strengthen this plan so it can be presented in the way it's been presented today. Thank you very much, Paul. I've got Tom Sables from BFBS Forces News.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Tom Sables, BFBS Forces News. As a Labour Prime Minister, you pledged £9 billion to upgrade 90% of military housing. Given that now there's reports that that money is being moved to fund the DIP, what's your message to military personnel living in substandard accommodation after your promises?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. Firstly, let me start by saying we have put a lot of money into military housing, and I'm proud that we have. It was very important that we did that. Alongside that, we have awarded 3 pay awards now, pay increases of above inflation. And again, I'm really proud that was the right thing to do, because it affects the morale, retention rates, and reflects the service that is given to this country by those that serve us. We will continue to do that. Of course, I have to balance that against investment in the military capability that we need. But in relation to the money we have put into the housing, in relation to the pay awards we have already made, I'm proud that we made those. We made it to reflect what we know our armed services give to our country, of which we are very thankful and very proud. Thank you very much, Tom. I've got Sophie Huskerton from the Daily Mirror. Sophie.
Hi, thank you, Prime Minister. So Andy Burnham has said he wants to stop departments spending too much time battling the Treasury instead of getting things done. The delay of your defence investment plan seemed like there was a bit of battling between the MOD and the Treasury. So what's your advice on Andy Burnham on this?
Well, let me just say a word or two about the Treasury and about this Chancellor, if I may, because we inherited an economy that was broken. And there's no doubting that. Nobody argues about that. And this Chancellor put it on a stable footing. And you saw that in the figures earlier this year that were set out in the spring statement. They spoke for themselves. And you can see it every day, because what I see and what the Chancellor sees are the numbers that give us an indication of the impact of the conflict in Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz on our country. The impact on our country, and less than it otherwise would have been, because our economy is stabilised. Look at the inflation rates across Europe. Look at our growth projected rates across Europe. So that is the work that this Chancellor has done, and I'm very proud of Rachel in relation to that. To have stabilised our economy in 2 short years after what we picked up means that I can depart the stage, because it's the end of my journey, it's not the end of anybody else's, but I depart knowing that we have left this country in a better state than we got it. Are there wranglings between departments and the Treasury? Yes, of course there are. There always have been, always will be, because at the end of the day, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have to look at the overall judgments for the government, the overall affordability, and prioritise between different things. Departments, of course, will put forward, in good faith, the commitments they think we should make. I understand that. But what we have to do is judge them against what we can afford, what the priorities of the country are. That's what we've done for 2 years. I'm really pleased that as a result of those judgments, our economy is stable and in a better place. That impacts people across the country hugely. That our public services are improving, particularly our NHS. And we're able today to announce this further investment in our defence and security. And I'm very proud of the fact, Rachel referenced that she went to Kyiv yesterday, that the standing of the United Kingdom in the world is in a much better place than it was 2 years ago, and I don't think anybody would really dispute that on defence and security and many other issues. Thank you very much. I've got Dan Martin from the Daily Telegraph. Dan.
Thank you, Prime Minister. How can you present this defence investment plan at the NATO summit when you're Prime Minister in name only? And also, Donald Trump wants you to meet this 5% target of GDP by 2035. Do you think that's possible for the UK, and what will you tell him at the summit?
I spoke to President Trump just 2 weeks ago when we were at the G7 together at great length about a number of issues, particularly the conflicts in Ukraine and the conflicts in Iran. And actually a very strong statement on Ukraine was put out from the G7, as you will have seen, showing the unity of that group of countries. This is additional investment today on top of the highest sustained increase since the Cold War, since the 1980s. I talked through Mark Rutte, the Secretary-General of NATO, talked him through this yesterday, talked to him very frequently on the phone as well as in person, have a very good relationship with him. He is very welcoming of what we are doing here today because he knows what a contribution it makes to NATO. He also appreciates, and we must never lose sight of this, of the huge contribution that the UK makes to NATO, not just as a leading advocate, a member of NATO, but of course we confirm our nuclear capability to NATO, which is an incredible capability, which keeps us and the whole of NATO countries safe. And I'm very proud that we do that. I'm proud of that work. I'm glad on the 5% commitment by 2035. Today takes us to 4.2% towards that target. I will be very pleased to report that back to colleagues at NATO next week. They will be very pleased to discuss this with us, and I'm proud of the record I stand on in relation to defence and security as I go into that summit. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues.
Well, that was Sir Keir Starmer giving his defence investment plan presentation at a drone factory in Berkshire. Charlie Peters joins us now in the studio. Charlie, this has been a long-awaited day. What do you make of the Prime Minister's commitments to defence?
Yes, it's 393 days since the Defence Review was published last year. We were expecting this plan, of course, in the autumn of 2025, and information has finally come out now. Of course, it won't be fully revealed until Parliament starts to debate it later today, but we have had a few leaked snippets over the last couple of days, and of course this speech today from Sir Keir Starmer has set out some of those key funding targets and ambitions. But what has happened in those 393 days? It's been delayed by 10 months, 5 times at least officially, and that defence plan was titled Making Britain Safer, Secure at Home, Strong Abroad. It required this spending commitment, which the Prime Minister signed off on. He's then essentially refused to pay that amount. He has then called it transformative, described it as what is necessary to keep Britain safe, potentially, as Christopher Hope will talk about later, to secure a political legacy. But it clearly isn't enough, according to defence chiefs. This spending, then, that we've heard from today, this will equate to about 2.69% of our GDP on defence by 2030. That's going to put Britain miles behind other key critical NATO allies, not just the big spenders, but also colleagues in NATO who are right on the front line of this disintegrating European security situation. Now, Germany, they'll spend 3.7% of their GDP by 2030. Sweden, obviously previously neutral, not even in NATO until recently, they've pledged 3.5%. Lithuania, 4%. Latvia, 3.73%. The United States at 3.22%. But of course, the American GDP trumps everyone else by quite a considerable distance. Let's go back to what John Healey said when he resigned, actually in his resignation speech in Parliament last week. He told MPs At this dangerous time, I see the current defence investment plans falling well short of what is required. He said that a rise of 0.08% from next year to 2030, that's no date for reaching 3% and no path to 3.5. He said, when allies are looking for British leadership, we must not fall behind. So the extra £1 billion or so that Dan Jarvis has found in 2 weeks, replacing John Healey, that's £9.3 billion per annum short of what we heard from John Healey saying what Britain was needing to keep it safe. So where has Dan Jarvis found that extra billion, and where he obviously won't find that additional 9.3 billion? Well, it's being reported that most of it's coming from cutting back on the cadets, plans to revamp them and expand them, and also plans to improve and refurbish military homes. Now, here's another John Healey legacy. In November of last year, he launched the Defence Housing Strategy. He said it was the biggest renewal of armed forces housing in 50 years. It pledged £9 billion over the next decade, modernising 9 out of 10 family homes, refurbishing all of the 47,700 family service homes, about 14,000 needing and getting substantial work or even full replacement. So, Dan Jarvis is set to get an extra billion by delaying those plans. So how many will be refurbished now? We don't know. And take into account that Dan Jarvis, himself formerly an army major who lived on a pad on a military garrison, starting his career in Aldershot, where he was first posted, he said in his speech, as defence chiefs and defence leaders always do, our people are our strongest asset, our most important asset. Well, to get people, you need to retain them. And to retain them, you need to pay them. There is going to be a real terms pay increase, about 3% for members of the armed forces. But living conditions matter as well. The Defence Infrastructure Organisation, DIO, is often nicknamed in forces families as DI-No, because when they phone up to say, my house is in disarray, often the answer is, no, sorry, can't do it. But what John Healey's put forward in November was a plan to perhaps turn that reputation around. That is now less likely to happen as a consequence of this plan. People first, perhaps, but their lifestyles and their living situation won't match that rhetoric. We can just say that very comfortably now. The government will be cutting back on the comfort and the ability to retain armed forces personnel. Let's talk more broadly about what's being announced, though. This extra £5 billion for drones. There has, of course, been a major focus on autonomous warfare, the shift away from crewed platforms, from land warfare, from tanks, artillery, Air Force and Navy focuses, onto more next-generation warfare. There is a problem with this focus, I think, as well. Politicians, as I think we're seeing a bit of at the moment, they might, unfortunately, consider vital legacy equipment as essentially obsolete, that we no longer need guns because we invented the tank. We no longer need tanks because we invented the drone. That's the situation we're in. I mean, we can see wider cutbacks more generally. 3 Commando Brigade is now becoming the UK Commando Force, I'm sure in part because it isn't really a brigade anymore. And if I could just say something on that point in particular, a former Australian Army Major General, Catherine Toohey, she said, a tank is like a dinner jacket. You don't need it every day, but when you need one, nothing else will do. The situation we are in now is that we're cutting back on rather a large number of dinner jackets in favour of autonomous systems that complement rather than replace those crewed systems. Talking about the destroyers we're no longer going to get, for example. We have these Type 31 and Type 26 frigates that are coming in, but we're cutting back on the Type 83 that is going to replace the Type 45, which are already in such a perilous state. To announce that you're getting rid of your destroyers and the replacement for them right after the debacle we have seen with not being able to send out a destroyer to defend our assets in Cyprus could be considered madness.
Some very difficult trade-offs there, Chopper.
Well, looking at those, I mean, the PM talked there about some capital projects. Road and energy will no longer go ahead as planned. Capital budgets cut by 1p in the pound. What that means in politics is that's going to affect economic growth. We know borrowing to invest in capital spending is what Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules allow.
That's her whole mantra.
They're not going to. They're cutting back on investment.
to fuel defence? Why aren't they cutting things which some would say should be cut, like the benefits bill, etc.? That's the question mark for this government, but he's made a choice here to cut back on bits of our economy that actually provide the growth to pay for future defence needs. It looks a bit short-term for me. Striking about the lack of naming Andy Burnham.
Couldn't bring himself to use his name.
Should say, by the way, the PM didn't take a question from Catherine Forster in the room, unusually and uniquely amongst news channels, which is, I think, is a total outrage.
Yeah,
and we're calling it out yet again, and calling it out again on social media. And Catherine, of course, reporting from there all day on this topic. Asked directly, does Andy Burnham sign up to this? We are told by sources it's a settled is the word we used by a friend of Andy Burnham, a settled defence and investment plan. The PM says this is something which any Labour PM will stand behind, and the first duty is defence of this country, not saying that person will be Andy Burnham. And just finally, why was Rachel Reeves there?
Why was she there?
Rachel Reeves was there to show that it's backed by the Treasury and the Ministry of Defence. Of course, Dan Jarvis said at the beginning. But we do know, of course, that Rachel Reeves and John Healey had a clash over this budget when it was £1.5 billion less. And the PM there making an appeal, I think, to Andy Burnham to keep Rachel Reeves on by saying, I'm very proud of Rachel Reeves, but my journey is ending, not the same for anybody else's. Clearly saying, keep Rachel Reeves on in some capacity to Andy Burnham, I think.
Everything about Rachel Reeves is doomed.
Not everything, Andrew.
No, her cabinet career as Chancellor is over.
Well, she hasn't. She has done a lot of U-turns, and she probably shouldn't have accepted not increasing VAT, national insurance or income tax, given the state of the public finances back in 2024.
And Charlie, just to continue with the analysis, I mean, you've been covering this in extensive detail. What other things do we need to be looking out for in the plan?
I think it was interesting how often Keir Starmer spoke about Ukraine and spoke about how they didn't have a navy or an air force ready to speak of, but they were able to resist the Russian military efforts at the start of 2022. We need to take this with some caveats, because I think he's using that example to essentially promote this vision of a more nimble, lighter, smaller British military that is more capable and enhanced to react to these threats. Britain is not Ukraine. We have a bigger set of interests than the Ukrainians are just interested in territorial defence. We have interests globally, and we're not able to meet any of them sufficiently at the moment. That's been exposed by the war in Iran. But also, we need to take a pinch of salt with that analogy in any case, because Russia's attack was stalled by hysterically awful strategic errors that made Ukrainian defence possible. But also, Ukraine was able to resist due to major British and American surges in equipment and capabilities that they didn't have before. Nobody is coming to Britain's urgent defence in that sort of scenario. NATO is there, of course. They can supply all sorts of capabilities and arms, but we're all skint. Everything that we have had has gone towards Ukraine. We are much more limited because of that. And he spoke about the Black Sea Fleet, Keir Starmer, drawing out in particular. It's true that in April 2022, the Ukrainians were able to sink the Moskva, the most senior flag of the ship in the Black Sea Fleet. But Ukraine was only able to do that because a US Navy P-8 Poseidon patrol craft was over, spotted it, and passed that intelligence back quickly. Ukraine doesn't have any of those capabilities. Britain does have some of them. But the fact of the matter is, and perhaps to borrow a line from the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, quantity has a quality all of its own. You need to have these capabilities. We are lacking them. Ukraine is firing 2 million shells a year. Can Sir Keir Starmer stand there and say that we are like Ukraine in that sense? Absolutely not. Our supply of artillery, the god of war, which can't be spoofed and can't be jammed, it's pitiful in comparison.
Indeed, I was reading an analysis this morning saying we only had 2 days of consumables, which is clearly not enough to sustain a war. Charlie, thank you very much. We'll be coming back to you later.
And thanks to Christopher Hope. We're going to talk now to retired Army Officer Colonel Simon Diggins. Colonel Diggins, good morning. You've heard the Prime Minister. We finally got the Defence Investment Plan. Not much meat on that bone, I would suggest.
Good morning to you. You know, I mean, I've graded it a kind of C+, so it's a pass. I mean, the reason it's a pass is because we've got it out. One of the things that's been really hard, not just for defence, but for defence manufacturers in particular, has been that they didn't know what the plan was. They didn't know whether to invest, they didn't know what to do about anything. So we've got the plan out, which is something. But it's not, as Charlie's very, very adequately and very, very fully explained, it's not fully what we need. We've had Sir Charles Knighton, Sir Richard Knighton, who was the former Chief of Defence Staff until September last year, talking about 4% of GDP being required. General Sir Richard Barron's on the radio this morning was talking about the same thing. So a long way short of what we actually require. And some of the trade-offs are extremely painful. Charlie was very right about the need to have a kind of global presence. And that's where this argument about destroyers versus drones is frankly so negative. There is not a dichotomy there. We need both. We need drones because we need to reflect what the modern warfare is, but we need destroyers for all the other things we need to do. We've got 2 fleet aircraft carriers. They cannot sail by themselves. They need air defence destroyers, they need escort ships, they need anti-submarine warfare capabilities. All those things need to be provided by proper warships. And then there's a very painful issues around which directly affect morale, around things like the cutback or potential cutback we're hearing in terms of accommodation for our service personnel. The survey that took place last year, the Continuous Attitude Survey, which is conducted every year within the armed forces, suggests that morale at the moment in the armed forces is poor, it's fragile. Less than 40% of our service personnel believe that they're doing a good job and are satisfied with where they are. That needs addressing, and it's things like pay, it's things like accommodation, but also a sense that they've got the kit and equipment and the resources to do the job properly.
Colonel Diggins, Lord Robertson, who was a Defence Secretary, who did the Defence Review for Keir Starmer, said in April Britain was underprepared, underinsured, under attack, not safe. The country's national security was in peril. Has anything you've heard in that Defence Investment Plan today changed anything about what Lord Robertson said just a couple of months ago?
I think the only thing is it's a start, and you have to acknowledge the start. If you look back to a similar period in our history, back to the pre-war period before the Second World War, in 1936 there was a kind of change of mood in the country. People recognised the situation was changed, and they had what they called a supplementary estimate in November of that year. It wasn't enough, and if you look what then happened over the following 2 to 3 years, there was a significant ramping up of defence expenditure. So it's a beginning, and we need to start somewhere. So I'm pleased to start somewhere. I'm also pleased that there's been a rebalancing of some of the where the money is going to go. One of the arguments that was against the challenge we had with the 28 billion, which is what the service chiefs were originally asking for, was so much of it seemed to be going in what you might call legacy equipment. As I said, some of those legacy equipments are absolutely vital, but there wasn't really a real emphasis in there on some of the lessons we learned, particularly from Ukraine, but also from the Iran-Israel-America war as well. And what we've heard, and we've only heard it so far, is Dan Jarvis has managed to reorientate some of that, some 5 billion of the extra money coming our way towards what you might call those new technologies, those new capabilities we need to fight what looks like modern warfare rather than fighting the war even of 10 years ago. So it's a start, but it is only a start.
All right.
Simon Diggins, thank you so much for your time this morning. That's retired Army Officer Colonel Simon Diggins.
Now, did you see that awkward moment when the Chancellor was hugged by the Prime Minister, who she described as her friend? Have a look at this.
So it is my honour to introduce my friend, our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
Language experts discuss.
Well, indeed. Well, we have 2 experts, not sure body language experts, but experts nonetheless here with us in the studio. GBNews contributor and GP, Renee Honderkamp, and journalist Kevin Maguire. Kevin, let's start with you. I mean, whatever the political turmoil that we're going through, the personal turmoil for Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves will be very real. They're right to support each other at this moment, aren't they?
Yeah, well, it's sort of a mutual association, isn't it? Let's
Strength in numbers.
2 people they're about to get the sack. So
both walking the same plank.
Yeah, of course, she did it. She would have known what's Andy Burnham going to think, because it's going to be out of the Treasury. Does she get another job, or does he just bin her or offer her a job she can't, so junior she can't take it? While Starmer, all those questions are, will Andy Burnham do this? Will Andy Burnham do that? It's kind of like a phantom fears in his premiership.
If you remember, Kevin, John Major demoted Norman Lamont as Chancellor after Black Wednesday, made him Environment Secretary. It did not last long, and he ended with his blistering resignation.
I can't see how it would work for Andy Burnham or actually Rachel Reeves, or never mind the country, to have her in the cabinet. I think it's better for her to go off, and maybe she can come back at another time. But no, when
she does at least know the fiscal rules. I mean, it's important.
Yes. Well, he knows them. I think Andy Burnham there is. I mean, I wished he'd said, I'm not going to patronise him by telling you, of course I know, which is to reduce the proportion of borrowing at the end of the Parliament from at the beginning. But nevertheless, I think Andy Burnham just doesn't want lots of gotcha moments because he's failed them in the past. I go back now in 2015 when for the trade unions I hosted a Labour leadership hustings and asked him what... I used to always introduce my World Life round and I asked Andy Burnham how much a litre of petrol was. The average price at the time was 116p and he said 160p, which was way out. And I think he learned...
Who filled his car?
Yeah, well... He learnt then, because the next hustings he'd written down the price of everything, so if I asked it, he knew. But he just doesn't want to be assaulted by those questions all the time.
But what he wants,
taken a position
therefore, the reverse of that is he wants to control the narrative. He wants to control what we get to see on the front of our papers, and he can't do that.
No, well, no, you can't, because Britain's got a very free, angry Tory press, which is where the centre of gravity is, very much to the right. But every Prime Minister, every politician, everyone running a big company, a corporation, trade union, church, whatever, will attempt to control the narrative to somewhere, but you can never do it fully.
But what did you make of that? I mean, that was very awkward, wasn't it?
Interestingly, I'd said to Kevin in the break,
kiss.
watching this, he looks terribly, terribly wooden, as he always does, but also inside he must be in turmoil because really everybody's watching him, everybody's asking him about Burnham. He must be seething really deep down, and I'm sure he is. And at the same time, Reeves looked really awkward. She looked like a deer in the headlights, and we said that we think this is the problem of both of them. Looks count, and neither one of them have ever been able to portray that easy confidence that people sink into, and Burnham can.
They both also, I don't know why they don't get it. How you sound counts a lot in this day and age, and they both, if you're on they've just got these weird nasal voices,
they really
and
have.
they're a complete turn off, both of them.
You're gonna, I mean, both have had coaching, I'm sure.
But
you can only change them so far. It's just them, and we live in an era of social media and people wanting to see and hear you and relate to you. And they can't. I mean, look, poor Clement Attlee, who was a very successful post-war Labour Prime Minister, Churchill's deputy during the Second World War, he'd struggle now, and yet he was a towering giant
Well, it counts for a lot more now, doesn't it? Now there's so much media all the time, your voice, your face.
So your hunch, Kevin, is that she's gone for good?
Well, she's out of the Treasury, unquestionably.
He can't show things are changing if she gets...
Well, that's right, and you can't bring back Tony Blair or David Miliband or anybody. You've got to show change. On that day one, that is when he will be his most powerful. So when he stands on, we think it's going to be Monday, 20th of July, when he stands on the steps of Downing Street after having been to the palace to see the King and go through all that malarkey, getting the tone and what you say, and then presenting your cabinet, absolutely crucial. And it's where he's got to weigh up somebody like Ed Miliband, who might be on a similar page to him, but he comes with a lot of baggage.
Yeah, people think he's a weirdo. And he's been rejected by the electorate once before.
It's always been odd Ed, not red or green Ed. That has been his problem. He's got to make a decision. Does he make him Chancellor? He arguably could be a good Chancellor. But if people have taken against him, I think they have. You'll have great difficulty getting your message across.
I mean, I think it would be suicide to make Miliband Chancellor, I really do, but it would also be absolutely horrific for us. I mean, that's the other thing. I come at this from what is going to happen to people who are already squeaking? And it might look like you can squeeze more money from the middles, the jams, but I don't think you can. I think people look and see privilege, but don't realise how hard everybody is having it.
Those people being squeezed are the people Ed Miliband champions the most. I mean, that's his politics. He's left. There's no question. He's to the left of Yvette Cooper, who I still wonder if she will get the job. Northern MP, experienced cabinet minister,
another woman,
and a woman. If you're sacking the first female Chancellor in the country's history, and you're a bloke,
and she's been a Treasury minister,
and 126 years, Labour are asking who's the best person for the job.
Well, exactly. What woman is the best person for the job? That ought to be.
Is your lot ever going to choose a woman leader, Kevin?
I'm not a member of the Labour Party, but they will eventually. Will they choose it in my lifetime? Well, see how old I get to be.
Does it matter?
I mean, it's embarrassing for Labour.
Thank you both very much for your time this morning. We're going to move back to the defence story now. We've got the former Royal Navy officer and defence expert James Gator on the line. James, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure you were listening to Keir Starmer's presentation a few minutes ago. Some quite significant news for the Navy in the Defence Investment Plan, namely that the Type 83 destroyers are going to be scrapped and we're going to have 6 new air defence warships, command centres instead. What do you make of that decision?
Well, Miriam, good morning. I hope you can still hear me. There's been some disruption in this feed, but yes, first things first, we are perhaps at the end of the beginning. It is welcome news that the Strategic Defence Review finally has an accompanying budget 1 year later. And yes, you're right. It's good news that the Navy is specifically mentioned and that there is some meat around the bones of what the future of the Royal Navy is going to look like. But unfortunately, as I've said before, this movement towards autonomy and towards technology is the same movement that the Royal Navy has always taken in its 400-year history. There's no doubt that we would be adopting these methodologies. Of more concern is that we are adopting them because they are the only things that we can afford within the budget that's been made available.
James, do you think there are still some quite significant gaps then? And do you think that we have made the right decisions in how to allocate funding? There's been some discussion about how far to move into kind of new warfare, tech, AI, and how much we still need to traditional hardware, tanks, and basic equipment. I mean, isn't the answer that we need both, and there just isn't enough money in the pot to secure both sides of defence?
Well, the short answer to your point, Miriam, is yes. Look, I'm coming to you today live from King's College, where I'm at the Future of Economy Summit. And the fact is that none of the things that the future of security demand with regard to, for example, the engagement of industry, the engagement of finance houses to invest in defence companies, the engagement of the wider population to understand why we need armed services, have been discussed, were mentioned at all by the Prime Minister in his speech this morning. So yes, your point is well made. Adopting autonomy whilst rejecting traditional ships is a dangerous thing, because whilst the character of conflict is changing, and indeed has always changed, the character of geography doesn't change. We are still an island. We are still a long way from our dependent territories. We still have adversaries, and we still need to be able to get around the place. So I'm not entirely sure that these autonomous platforms will help us too much with that.
And can we protect ourselves? That's the most important question. Is this enough to protect ourselves from those adversaries?
Well, Andrew, John Healey and Al Carnes did not think so.
Right.
And notwithstanding the fact that Dan Jarvis has apparently secured an additional £1 billion, the simple truth, as you know, is that the service chiefs were calling for more. Now, of course, service chiefs will always call for more. But I reiterate, this is a decision being made by the Treasury, not by the Ministry of Defence. A decision made by an organisation that does not wish to give more money to defence, but does wish to give more money to other things, which personally I do not consider it to be the priority for this government. And ultimately, this is about prioritisation. So, to answer your question directly, are we safer with autonomous vehicles? Probably not. Will we learn this the hard way? Probably.
Very sobering.
James Gator, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Well, coming up next, we're off to Berkshire to speak to GBNews' Catherine Forster. Unfortunately, Keir Starmer refused to answer a question from her, but she will be reporting on the Defence Investment Plan.
But first, we're going to give you that elusive holiday sun. So we haven't got quite enough sun here. Here's the forecast for some of our top European destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello. Very hot weather and thunderstorms affecting parts of the Mediterranean and Eastern Europe through the next few days. Sunny and warm elsewhere across parts of Europe. The Canary Islands seeing highs of 30 degrees on Wednesday. Spain and Portugal temperatures in the high 20s, low 30s, much more reasonable than they have been lately. But it's Italy and towards Greece where very high temperatures are expected towards 40 degrees and a risk of heavy thunderstorms that continues until Friday. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
And it's Father's Day. I don't know if my dad's up yet. If you are, happy Father's Day.
He's already texted.
Is he?
He's tuning in.
Mr. Reaper, good morning to you.
Sunday, well, speaking of Sunday lunches, he'll be having a roast pork joint later, courtesy of myself.
Good.
Cards and gifts are a big part of the day, of course, but it's also important to remember that there is more to it than that.
Yeah, because it's not just about one day, is it? Actually, it's like, what do dads do? And healthy fathers, a healthy sort of father-son, father-daughter relationship builds strong families, builds strong communities and helps build a strong country, actually.
Well, that is why mentoring the next generation matters more than ever. So take a little extra time today. Make sure you do to appreciate not just the fathers or the grandfathers or the uncles out there, but any strong father figure that you may have.
GB News, the People's Channel. GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Welcome back to Breakfast, 25 minutes past 6. And breaking news this morning, the TV presenter Jeremy Clarkson has revealed that he's been diagnosed with aggressive prostate cancer in an emotional video.
In the scenes, he's telling his co-stars Caleb Cooper and Charlie Ireland, his land agent and his farm manager, and they're both devastated, as you can imagine. You know, it's a huge bombshell to drop on them. He's only 66. He's made no secrets that he's maybe not lived the healthiest lifestyle. After the heart problems, he bemoans having to eat Greek yogurt and kale and whatnot. But following this, I think he's going to have a complete lifestyle overhaul even further, and just fingers crossed the treatment proves effective.
GB News, the People's Channel. Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Hello there, Emily and Tom. Yes, some breaking news in the last few moments from Kensington Palace regarding our future king, Prince George of Wales, the oldest son of the Prince and Princess of Wales. The short statement from Kensington Palace reads, Kensington Palace can confirm that Prince George will attend Eton College in September. That news just coming in from the royal household in the last few moments. This clearly is, well, perhaps not surprising news for those in royal circles. Eton College, the most prestigious school, arguably in the country, educating 20 prime ministers and, of course, Prince George's own father and uncle, Prince William and Prince Harry, as well as 2 Dukes of Gloucester, the Duke of Kent and Prince Michael of Kent as well. So that confirmation just coming in from Kensington Palace, £63,000 a year it costs to send a child to Eton College.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Snubbed.
Well, let's cross back now to GB News' chief political correspondent, Catherine Forster. She's in Berkshire.
Snubbed by the Prime Minister. Snubbed, Catherine. It's outrageous.
Yes, well, good morning from a drone factory in Berkshire. Very disappointing for GB News not to get a question. I think I gave somebody in number 10 quite a hard time on defence spending back in Armenia. That possibly might be coming back to bite me now. But when I went to the launch of the Strategic Defence Review, which was in Glasgow last June, little did I think that it would be over a year since the publication of this defence investment plan, the blueprint of where the money is going to be coming from to fund defence over the next few years, because it was supposed to be published last autumn. Then the MOD found a massive £28 billion black hole. And now, of course, there's been a massive row over recent weeks. John Healey, the Defence Secretary, and Al Khan's Armed Forces Minister both resigned a few weeks ago because the Treasury were only offering an additional $13.5 billion. They basically said that the Prime Minister was unable and the Treasury unwilling to do what was necessary to keep us safe. Now, we've got a new Defence Secretary in Dan Jarvis. He was here saying that the Prime Minister deserves credit. Also, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, probably not much longer in that job. And I felt that the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, Dan Jarvis, the Defence Secretary, all trying to present a united front. Look, this is a great deal. We're doing what is necessary. We are leading in Europe. The Prime Minister adamant that he's passing on a better country than that he inherited from the Tories. Very keen to stress that defence spending is up considerably, the biggest uplift since the end of the Cold War, £5 billion for equipment like drones. We know that warfare has changed. The Ukraine war has really shown us that, but also saying that there's difficult trade-offs. There's going to be some capital, road and energy projects that were slated to happen that are not going to go ahead. But is it enough? Is it enough? General Sir Richard Barrons, who's one of the co-authors of the Strategic Defence Review, has already said that it's not going to crack the issue and that it's not keeping up with our allies and enemies. Now, on that, we've pledged to get to 5% by 2035. We haven't even laid out how we're going to get to 3%, but other countries in Europe are already surging ahead. Germany will be at 3.7, Sweden be at 3.5. So are we really leading, or are we being left behind despite the record?
OK. Catherine Forster, thank you very much for that update from Berkshire. Well, what a morning, Andrew. We've been waiting for this for so long, but it does not seem to tick the boxes that the military need to keep us safe.
And I think they know more about it than politicians.
Indeed. Well, that's it from Britain's Newsroom. We're back tomorrow, but up next is Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Dawn.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Showers will affect many northern areas with the risk of thunderstorms. Relatively dry, though, through today across the south and east, but a bit of a windier day for many western areas. That's thanks to an area of low pressure out to the north and west of the UK. That will drag in spells of rain through much of the day, particularly across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we've had quite a lot of rainfall overnight. Some of these showers will push into parts of Wales, southwestern England through this afternoon as well. There is a risk of some thundery downpours as well in there, risk of lightning as well. In the south and east, it should remain relatively dry and bright through the day, and we'll feel relatively warm in the sunshine with temperatures climbing towards 25 degrees. Now into this evening, the showers push further eastwards into more central areas of England. Further north and across parts of Scotland, still a pretty unsettled end to the day, risk of some quite heavy downpours, as well as that continued lightning risk across parts of Northern Ireland as well. More western areas of Northern Ireland, a little bit drier. Starting to see a bit of a change by the end of the day, but I think these showers across more central areas of England also bring a risk of thunderstorms into this evening. Those showers will continue eastwards overnight, pushing into more eastern areas of England for a time, though they do start to fade away once the sun goes down. And for most of us, it's going to be a pretty dry and clear night, though cloud will thicken across more western areas, particularly across the coast and the high ground. Could see some drizzly rain overnight, but across many eastern areas, clear skies for many. So a bit of a fresher night across the east into tonight. Further west, though, still relatively mild. Plenty of cloud around across western areas through Wednesday. Some hazy sunshine further south, particularly into the afternoon after a pretty fine start to the day. There's a risk of the odd shower into the afternoon across anywhere really across the UK, but just look relatively light. And then more heavy rain pushes into parts of Northern Ireland and Western Scotland by the end of the day. But it is going to be another warm day with temperatures climbing to 26 degrees. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's the Great British Giveaway Golden Summer Celebration. Your chance to win 2 fantastic prizes. There's an incredible £60,000 in tax-free cash. Plus, you'll also get your hands on a fine gold bar worth over £5,000. For a chance to win £60,000 in tax-free cash and a real gold bar, text GOLD to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB22 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 21st of August. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pulled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Join me, Nana Okwir, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howard. This is the show where each week we see what's happening in the world of culture, current affairs and politics.
First we'll say, welcome to the UK. Oh, thank you.
And we're not afraid to use our free speech so that you can use yours.
It's not controversial in the slightest to anyone who hasn't lost their mind.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.